Please welcome your afternoon panel moderator, Cvent's Senior Manager of Client Success, Chris Justice.
Sustainability goals. I am really excited to lead this panel today. As your moderator, we have some great contributors with us today. One of them is acting very sustainably and has taken public transportation and is therefore going to be a little late. But we're going to welcome her and mic her up as soon as she gets here. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and move forward with our other speakers who I'd love to welcome up to the stage. So Anna and Matt, come on up. All right, have a seat. But before we really get started, I want to make sure that we introduce everybody and do a couple of housekeeping items as well. We are doing Q&A for this session, so if you are opening up your app and pull up the session, you'll see that there's an opportunity to do Q&A. I have an iPad up here that I'll be looking at later in order to answer some questions. In addition to that, let's do some introductions. So we have Anna Abdelnour here and Matt Gray, but I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves. That's the best way to make sure we get the right information across, what they want you to hear. So I'll start with you, Matt.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Matt Gray. I'm the founder of Event Decision. We, as it says on the tin, help event planners make better decisions. And one of the major channels that we do that in is with our suite of products within Track, which measures the carbon footprints of events for brands, for agencies, for venues, for platforms. That's probably about it. I'm sure you'll find out more about both of us in just a sec.
Not doing yourself justice about it. Hi, I'm Anna. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of ILA. So we're the event industry sustainability body operating primarily within the UK, but with a lot of global members. We've got 3 tracks to our organisation. We have kind of a community arm, association membership, where we have best practice, peer-to-peer knowledge sharing, case studies, opportunities for sharing amongst stakeholder groups. We also have a services arm where we look at education, workshops, action groups, resources, resource development. What do people practically need to make changes when it comes to event sustainability? And then our sort of leadership, data, insights, information, awareness, raising the profile of sustainability within the events industry. And we do that kind of all under the umbrella of multi-stakeholder collaboration. So we work with stakeholders across the full supply chain, agencies, venues, destinations, event supply businesses, caterers, and so on, so that we are not working in silo when it comes to solving industry transformation.
So the reason that we're having the panel today is you've probably noticed, it's pretty difficult to miss, that sustainability as a topic in the meetings industry has really become something that every one of us is being asked about, is talking about. And it's one of the things that's really risen out of the change from pandemic, what happened in the pandemic, and then asking ourselves, how can we do things better? And obviously Anna and Matt are at the forefront of those conversations as well. Abena, great to see you. Well, that's perfect. So before we go into actual questions, I want to make sure we give Abena a chance to introduce herself as well. So Abena Fairweather, Managing Director of Legacy Events. But go ahead and we just had an opportunity to hear from Anna and Matt, sort of their role in the events industry.
Thank you, and apologies for being late. I fell foul of the train strike. So my name is Abena Fairweather. I'm the Managing Director of Legacy, and our mission as a consultancy, an agency, and an e-commerce marketplace is to make events sustainable. So we do that looking at 9 themes. Energy and carbon is one of our themes. Food and drink is one of our themes. Materials and waste is one of our themes. We feel that sustainability should really be covered across a whole load of different subjects for an event to be truly sustainable. And so we do that through training, through workshops, through audits, through running events ourselves as an example of best practice, and also through our marketplace where we endeavour to connect people sourcing products in the events industry with sustainable events, products and suppliers.
Great, well let's go ahead and get started. The idea behind the session is is really around tracking and saying, you know, well, many of us are at the beginning of that journey, and so this is a great section for you if you are looking for some guidance on sort of how to get started or how to sort of move further along in that journey. So as part of that question, I think we need to set the stage and talk about the current reality. Where are we today? So let's set that stage. You know, Anna, where is the industry now in terms of measuring our carbon footprint and, well, putting on sustainable meetings?
All over the place. Honestly, it's quite scrappy. We've got so much activity in the kind of environmental sustainability space from people who have been working on it for a long time, big corporates, if you take sort of Microsofts and Googles, you know, really putting their foot forward and making changes and transitions. And that's not necessarily happening across the board. There's a lot of people at the beginning of their journey as well. And that's probably where about 95% of the industry is, which is fine. We're starting. You know, it's not a criticism, it's a new area that we're all working in and focusing on. So it's quite scrappy at the moment. We could be doing more, we could be doing better, but we've got to get onto the track, right? So that's the first stage. So we're there now. I think the industry is there now. There's very, very few organizations that aren't.
Yeah. Matt, what about you? What do you think? Where are we?
I concur with Anna, actually. There's such a wide range of organizations. I mean, we're a disparate bunch, right, in the events industry. In this very event, you know, where we are today, we've got all the different types of stakeholders. Not all of them, probably, and everyone's at a different stage. Everyone has a different understanding of what sustainability is. We're going to talk about carbon calculators. That's one definition, and it's the one that the events industry has grabbed hold of. I think as an industry as a whole, we're somewhat behind many others. If we look at, I know, automotives, and everyone goes cars and carbon, they're not a great mix. The automotive industry has done an amazing job in moving their customers, that's us when we buy cars, to make our decisions on sustainable grounds. And yet we don't see an awful lot, and we may come to some examples later, of that within the events industry yet. So we're buying hybrids and EVs and all sorts of different types of vehicles and making big money decisions for us as individuals on sustainability grounds. That's how it's sold to us. And yet events, we've seen some behavior that's really, really good. And genuinely, with bill payers who are prepared and stakeholders and organizational directors and so forth who really do walk the walk. And then we're seeing some who are really at the beginning and when nothing's changed pre or post COVID, say, and the behavior in the events just carry on with huge amount of consumption going on. So yeah, a great deal of variance within the industry.
Yeah. All right, so that's the current state, not particularly encouraging so far. It sounds like we have a lot more to do. And that's where I want to turn to you, Abena. So let's say, I think we all recognize that many of the people in the room here, out there, and generally in the events industry would recognize that they're at the beginning of that journey as a meetings department, as sometimes even as a company. So getting a little bit into practicalities or something to really grab onto. If you're in that situation as an organization, as a meetings and events department, where do you start?
It's such a great question, and a lot of the people Legacy works with are really at that beginning of the journey and they don't know where to start because it is such a daunting subject. So following on from what Anna and Matt just said, I think one place to start is to realize that sustainability now is not a trend, it's not going away, it doesn't really sit with your CSR or your community initiatives anymore. If the events of the last summer and recent events politically have showed us all, is that conservation of resources and in particular energy is a commercial issue. It's something your commercial team should be involved with, it's something your planner should be involved with, it's something that affects your whole business. So involving your entire organization in this issue and working out how it impacts each department is a great place to start. And then to realize that as an industry, you're not alone, there are plenty of help out there. So to reach out in terms of understanding how that issue affects you in particular, there are many organizations, ILA is a great one, there are consultants like us, like Legacy, who can help you at the beginning of the journey, mapping out exactly what reducing your carbon footprint means for you as an individual and also as a business.
Mm-hmm. So, good news, you don't all have to get PhDs in sustainability in order to do sustainable meetings. That's excellent. You know, there's different approaches. You all work for different organizations and have different sort of perspectives on that question. And I actually want to pose it to all of you because I think you'll provide different ideas. So the same idea, we're ready. The meetings department says, but they want to get started on this journey. Where would you begin, Anna?
I think it depends on where your organization is in terms of, have you set your commitments? Have you set an ambition? Do you have a target that you're working towards? If you do, that needs to be something that the whole business is getting behind and working towards. So you start there. What is it that we are trying to achieve? What have we commit to? Okay, now how do we strategize around that ambition? And how do we ensure that that's an accessible ambition for everybody? It shouldn't be, that commitment needs to be communicable by everybody in your business so that every person from the cleaning team right through to the CEO is able to articulate what are we trying to achieve. Because when you put the power and the agency into people's hands, they find solutions within their remit. They're the experts in the sector or the small area or the department that they're working in. So a communicable commitment that everybody can find their way of contributing to is the place to start. So if you've got one, make sure everybody knows what it is. And if you don't have one, set one. And that can be around an individual organizational commitment based on kind of the type of work that you're doing or the things that are important to you. What's when we talk about materiality assessments, it's what are those material things that are important to our multiple stakeholders. But if you don't know how to get to that yourself, go for net zero. That's a global goal that every single, organization, company, government is working to. It's the single goal that the entire human race is fundamentally united behind. So if you're not able to set an individual one for your organization, go with that. And then you can start looking at your strategy around that. And there are so many resources out there for you to be able to do that.
Yeah. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Within your strategy, there are obviously a number of tactics. We're here with the headline carbon calculators. They're no more complex, by the way, than a desk calculator to do your maths homework. There's just different models of how you can access them. But the first point of call has to be, where are we now? It's not, I don't often say it in this forum, but you can say, if you want to lose some weight and go on a diet or a fitness regime, you start with a measurement. And then you can put in your targets and your benchmarks according to that. So a carbon calculator is no more complex. It's a new science to events. We were saying off stage, Anna's organisation, ILA, is 3 and a bit years old now, I think. Event Decision is coming up 1.5 years. Both have a huge number of brands associated because there aren't that many people that will support planners and event owners in calculating carbon footprints. But actually, there's a model, there's a way to get this information, however many events, whether they're small and plentiful, whether they're infrequent and enormous, whether you're a marketeer and events is a side part, whether you're a professional planner, there's a tool out there for you. We have one, which is off the shelf. Anna has one, which is Isla, which is different again. And there's a number of sites, platforms, services that can help you understand what the event footprint actually looks like. So, for example, this event, we measured it last week. That data will go to Cvent. I don't think you've seen it, Chris, so I won't put you on the spot.
I'm very curious.
But to undertake this exercise, have a look at your event's footprint. And then you understand where the big chunks are, and therefore where you can start to address them within your strategy or within the framework that you use from ILA and so forth. But you have to look at a real graph. It's not a complex graph. It might only have a couple of sections, but it will show you where the big chunks of emissions lie with an event. So we won't say where are the big chunks for this event. Those of us who are in the industry probably know this is a not global but big regional event, and therefore there are people flying. We can expect that to be a big portion. But it's to understand what are small but visible factors, and what are almost invisible factors, but contribute a huge amount to the carbon footprint of an event.
All right, so I'm hearing the main message is measure first. So you know what you're dealing with, essentially. And that makes a lot of sense. Like, can you do year-over-year reductions if you don't know where you started from? So that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that you mentioned in an early conversation that we had is you said, get ready for some hard work. Right? And that really struck me as well, because I do think that as the meetings and events industry, we would like to imagine that we can just quickly do a few things and then everything will be solved. But it sounds to me like there's a little bit more behind it. So can you elaborate on that a little bit? What do you mean when you say that?
Absolutely. I know the industry really appreciates quick wins because we're all busy, and I think a lot of people, when they're running an event, they feel they don't have time to sit down and dwell into some of this detail. But unfortunately, especially if you're aiming for an ambitious target like net zero, the Kermit saying applies in that it's not easy being green. And it's not, otherwise we wouldn't be in the situation we are. So I think first of all, we have to dispel this idea that it's an easy thing to get to net zero or to reduce your carbon footprint, and you just have to switch off some lights and you're there. That's not the case at all. Having said that, I perhaps wanted to run through some maybe more practical examples just to give an idea of what I mean. So from worst case to best case, the worst case practice we generally see is that an organisation realises that they need to do something about sustainability and specifically their carbon footprint. So they hand that task to a junior member of staff or even the intern who's not even going to be there permanently, with no training, no budget, and that person's expected to do this outside of their normal work. And that really is a path to failure for all kinds of reasons. This is not something that sits with the intern or the work experience person or the most junior member of the organisation. Best practice would be giving this to somebody at board or senior exec level and making it part of all of their roles. So creating a separate sustainability role is fantastic, but really sustainability needs to be part of everyone's role at that level, your chief exec, your CFO, your CMO, your CIO. I think I saw a statistic that 57% of FTSE companies now award pay and bonuses in relation to CSR or ESG targets. So this is common practice in the corporate world. It should be common practice in the events world. So once that is then owned by members of the C-suite or the board, then you really have action and seniority to be able to make real change. And at that stage, you can then look at how to measure your carbon footprint, know where you are, and set goals for where you want to be.
Can I just,
yeah, absolutely.
Just on that, how many people here have heard of B Corp? How many people sort of see B Corp as a bit of as the gold standard for good business within that? Yeah, so I mean, just in terms of that, you get points to become a B Corp company, and actually you score a large number of points if CEO job is tied into carbon emission reductions. So rather than just business growth, it's actually tied into carbon. So to lend the point that Avan is talking about, this is about aspiration as much as anything else.
It is, and it's a business transformation. And B Corp, I should have mentioned, is an excellent standard. I should say that actually Legacy is a B Corp, and we are one of 2 B Corp, event management B Corps in this country. And we feel lonely.
Wow.
So I really would encourage you, if your business is serious about really reducing your carbon footprint and becoming sustainable, B Corp is a great place to start, and it would be a great plus point for your brand as well, to be able to say you're in the events industry and you are a B Corp.
Yeah, very nice. One of the things I want to get to is that sort of practical piece, right? What is it that we can take away from this in terms of tracking? So I want to talk. We've mentioned it previously, it's the measuring piece. Definitely that carbon footprint calculator is something that we hear a lot about. We hear say you need a way to measure, you need to do that and so on. There are a lot of options out there. It can feel very overwhelming. So I want to get some input from all of you, but I'll start with Anna on, okay, so the team has decided to measure. Step 1. The decision's been made, there's input from the executive team, so the money is there, but there's a lot of options out there. So how do you decide what is actually going to be an effective tool for measuring?
Yeah, I think Well, if you want to start with sort of a gold standard for measurement, we can kind of use Trace as an example. So Trace is a platform that we've built and created for the events industry, and it measures the full scope of events. So it doesn't just look at travel or just look at energy. It can go really kind of down into looking at the materials that you're using, the food that you're feeding to people, where your staff are staying, your online events as well, what the impact is there. And so really we're trying to capture as many metrics as possible so that we've got a full picture of an event, because we often bandy around the statistic, travel is 95% of an event's carbon footprint. It is if that's one of two things that you're measuring. And yes, we can't get away from the fact that travel has a huge impact, and travel does have a huge footprint. But if you're only measuring travel and you're only measuring energy usage, you've got these huge blind spots around your data and what you're actually measuring and comparing against. So Trace as a platform is actually looking at all of your event touch points so that you've got a broader view of the impact of what you're doing, and therefore can be more strategic in the areas that you do have control in. We don't have a huge amount of control over travel. We can encourage different behaviours. We can ask people to travel by public transport. We can look at carbon balancing programs, those sorts of things. But we have huge control in the way that we design our events, the way that we think about them, the way that we deliver them, the way we build our stands, who we contract. So actually once we start having a picture and knowing our emissions, to Matt's point, when you know your emissions, you can start putting, tactics into place that support a strategy, rather than just tactically saying, we'll do this or we'll do that, and not being able to measure the impact of those activities. So what you want to be looking for is, how ambitious are we? Let's look at the full profile, and then you can track down from there. You could just measure your travel, and that's good too. You're knowing your emissions there, but how do you build up based on your abilities, your commitment, your ambitions? So you can start small, but if you really want to commit to this, you want to be looking at this full profile of your event. And to Abhina's point as well, that's really about getting that investment, getting that time in, having people working in such a way that it's embedded within their role to collect the data and those sorts of things. So, gold standard is everything, not just travel and energy. But travel and energy is good data to collect if that's where you're starting from.
Mm-hmm. Matt, I know Event Decision takes a slightly different approach, and you might have different recommendations as well in terms of, how do you decide if something is the right fit for the organization to measure that impact?
It's a good question, because we said earlier there's a lot of calculators out there. Very few of them actually are event-focused and include as many data points, shall we say, as Trace from Isla. I think the outputs you get from several of them, including Track, Event Decision, are pretty similar in terms of the output, but it's the model that suits you as a planner that you need to decide on. So whether it's a subscription model that Anna has, or whether it's our off-the-shelf, if you're doing less frequent events, that's the decision. That's a financial decision for you to make. How often are you going to want to do this? What investment do you want to make in it? Whichever you choose, please, and I hope we'll agree on this, just do it early. Anna said, if you do it, there's no point. There's less point in measuring an event in November this year, where, as planners, everything will be nailed down weeks out, right? Perfectly. But you can't really change a lot. Whereas if you're measuring for November 2023 now, 12 months out, it opens up. You can look at the information you get from your calculator and go, actually, are we better doing regional events? Or should we it might help your decision on the in-person versus hybrid versus virtual debate, which we're not going to have here. But it opens up all those, and you can make those decisions using sustainability as a basis, based on some real information, rather than kind of tactically, we did this event, or we've got it next week, and the footprint's this. It's great that you're measuring. Well done. You're doing the right thing. But it's much more useful to do it early, and it opens up a whole, we are professional event planners, so let's use it to help plan events. That's what we're there for.
I'm taking a look at the time, so I want to be conscious of that. And what I want to do now is I'm going to ask sort of that parting thought question. I'll start with you, Abhina. I'll ask a full question in just a second, but then we're going to go to the Q&A to see what sort of the remaining question is. We'll probably have time for one or two questions, and then we'll close it out. So Abhina, what is that parting thought? So you have an audience here. If you could leave them with one sort of thought as a takeaway, what would it be?
My parting thought would be, it's a huge subject, but it's not going away, and you have to engage with it at some point. So don't be daunted, dive right in, start tomorrow. So when you go back to your desk or home or wherever you work from, look up Isla, see what you can do about joining one of their workshops so that you understand more about the subject, you understand more about the terms that are used, and that you can actually start making a difference. Those small steps at the beginning really are the crucial ones if you just start. So go to your desk, look at Isla or one of the various tools, and just start to understand where it is you can start this journey.
What about you, Anna?
I'm just watching Chris.
Oh, I know. I'm
with
trying
the
to
iPad.
figure out this
It's the
iPad
button on the
situation.
top, yeah.
It's encased like it's going to war.
It's a difficult one because there are so many different things to kind of go away with. I think my parting thought is we cannot be sitting here this time next year saying we're just starting. We're still just starting. We're still just starting. We have been saying that for decades, right? This was on the agenda before 2008. The parting thought is, what can you do over the next year? What kind of ambition can you set yourself personally? Because I can't sit here next year saying, yeah, we're just at the beginning of the journey. You know, the industry is taking its time. We're moving on, and it's okay to just be at the beginning. It's okay to be at the beginning now. It's not okay to be at the beginning in a year's time. So what can we do with that? How can you come back here in a year and say, this is the progress that we've made?
I love that. That's such a great benchmark for us. You know, we're always talking about benchmarking and sort of where are we. So in a year's time, when you're back at Connect, will you be thinking I'm just at the beginning? Matt?
I think I would sum it up in 3 words. Be honest. Greenwash is not a great thing to be called. Be open. If this is new and potentially frightening, it's all well and good for us who are in this world all the time to talk about this stuff, but we appreciate not everyone lives in this world. And be willing. You know, give it a go. Whatever model suits you, just start, as Anna said. Let's not be sitting here in a year's time saying, oh, we haven't done this yet. Let's have had a go. Let's do some measurement. Let's look at your strategy and, you know, move yourself along that journey. Like most things, once you start it, it becomes much clearer, much simpler, and far less scary. So, you know, we're all here, and there are others to help you on your journey.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that point? I would love to be sitting in this panel in a year's time with more B Corps from the events industry. So if that's the target you want to set yourself, give yourself a year to become a B Corp.
I love that too. And we are going to have time for one question. I'm going to pose it to Abhinav because it's very practical events production one, which is, what is the average additional cost of producing a more sustainable event?
That sounds like such a simple question, and I'd love to be able to answer it. I'm going to give the horrible, it's a piece of string answer, because it's the same as if I asked you what's the average cost of producing an event. So the first difficulty is, what do you mean by sustainable event? But I'm going to assume you mean carbon in this case. So to narrow it down a bit, what's the average cost of perhaps measuring your event carbon and then knowing what then to do? I can see the clock flashing at me, so I'll try and be brief. Events produce carbon emissions generally through 2 ways. Travel, so people getting to your event, and your venue. So how your venue powers and heats and cools its spaces. So the cost in choosing a venue, well, the cost in directing your delegates towards more sustainable travel options, and the cost towards choosing a venue that has taken steps to be more sustainable and reduce their energy use, 0. The cost to you in the work that is needed to find that venue and assess and do that kind of thing, well, that's down to your organisation and the expertise that you decide to use. So the answer is, I'm afraid, as long as a piece of string, from 0 up to your individual organisation's capabilities.
Thank you, Abhinav. And with that, we are going to close so that we make sure to close on time. So thank you again, Matt, Anna, Abhinav, for a great conversation. I'm sure they'll be ready to answer some more questions once we leave the stage. So let's give them a hand.